meeting of Cabinet Committee Regeneration on Tuesday the 15th of October from the Walton Suite, Winchester Guildhall. The time is 2:02. My name is Councillor Martin Todd, Chairperson of the Cabinet and Cabinet Member for Asset Management. This meeting is live streamed from the Council's YouTube channel, and the recording will also be available after the meeting. Subtitles can be switched on, and advice on how to turn these on is set out on our website. Please can everyone ensure mobile phones are on silent, and can I remind members to use their microphones. In the unlikely event that it is necessary to evacuate the building, the fire alarm will sound. Please follow all the instructions given to you by our team. Can I welcome any members of the public to the meeting? We will invite you forward if there's time to make a contribution. Turning to the agenda. First item is apologies for absence. We have apologies from Councillor Lerney, with Councillor Porter in attendance as a deputy, and apologies also from Councillor Cutler. We also have apologies received from Councillor Bolton, with Councillor Horrell in attendance as a deputy. Second item on the agenda is disclosures of interest. Do we have any disclosures of interest? I need to declare an interest as a county councillor, since there are undoubtedly some highways issues related to this, although it is a personal and non-prejudicial interest. Councillor Porter.
I would like to declare the same interest, please.
Are there any other interests that need declaration? The next item on the agenda is requests from councillors to speak. We have Councillor Lee, who wishes to speak on item 7 and item 8, and I will call you forward when we get to that point. In terms of public participation, we have no public participation. Item number 5, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 8th of February. Can anybody who was present agree that those minutes are agreed as a correct record?
Agreed.
Agreed. Good. Chair's announcements. I have no announcements at this point. Item 7. We have the station approach update, and Councillor Lee, would you like to make your comments first, and then we'll have the presentation?
Thank you, Chair. My comments are generic to both items 7 and 8, so I won't waste time and repeat for the next agenda item. So for station approach, I fully understand the concept master plan is not a detailed design of what will be built on site, but instead a set of guidelines or key parameters for developers. I note the mention of connected sustainability and sustainability strategy, plus allocating space for new trees, green areas, improving biodiversity, maintaining a natural setting for the city. Great. I also understand the Central Winchester Regeneration has an evolving development delivery plan with a sustainable strategy. Plus, I note it has completed co-creation workshops that focus on tackling climate change, but nature is not mentioned except for a call to action theme where it mentions Central Winchester Regeneration as a place for nature to thrive. I see the engagement up-to-date stakeholder map with interest groups and so on. But thinking about the guidelines for key parameters for developers, I'd like to pick up on some of my concerns about the natural environment, specifically the increasing climate crisis and nature crises, and the need for carbon neutrality with improved economic activity. So how does the station approach and the Central Winchester Regeneration approach intend to help future-proof and inform the preparation and determination of future planning applications for these regeneration schemes for the increasing climate and nature crises and the need for carbon neutrality with improved economic activity? The feedback I've received highlights that permeability considerations are done for people and vehicle movements, but not for nature. So again, as I asked for this morning at the bar and depot discussion, can we have a permeability plan or consideration for nature? It's not just biodiversity net gain, it's the networks that are important. As I mentioned again this morning, our nature is taking refuge in our urban and peri-urban areas, and a DEFRA study is available. The human-centric design focus, to my mind, really does need to shift to a more balanced consideration of biodiversity protection and recovery considerations, and that includes the urban environment. So can this be done? And can we provide this in future guidelines with the key parameters for developers, especially ecological networks for nature recovery and protection? So can I ask, can the consultants confirm, is this being looked at? And what best practice for this urban challenge are they considering? And can this please be shared? And for nature-based solutions and economic activity, you recall I've mentioned the Greater Manchester Combined Authorities Project Ignition, which is a groundbreaking project aimed at develop innovative financing solutions for investment in our environment, built and natural, to help increase, but in particular, city regions' resilience against the increasing threats of the climate change impacts. Working with nature, solutions, whether they be rain gardens, street trees, green roofs and walls, and development of green spaces, has been identified to tackle socio-environmental challenges. I'm not sure I'm seeing this in the presentations or what's been said before. Nature-based solutions are interventions that use nature to help solve specific problems like flooding or overheating for businesses in our communities. I think that is very, very relevant to the future of Winchester. The Ignition project has developed a wide range of resources, evidence and tools to help businesses, local authorities, landowners, communities and others to better understand and implement nature-based solutions. There is a phenomenal access database which we could be dipping into. So nature-based solutions for the climate emergency and nature emergency are important as we move towards a more circular economy with responsible consumption and production. Whether that be to capture water for on-site use, increasing the lifespan of buildings and infrastructure, increasing property values and comfort, and tackling the pollution crises, and looking to cleaner living and better attractive places. So has this excellent project resource been considered for these two development schemes? Will the consultants do more with considering and highlighting nature-based guidelines with key parameters for developers? And the final comment is that nature-based solutions and greening increases economic well-being, and this is manifestly a good thing to do to increase also our human-centric considerations by balancing it better with the biodiversity thinking that we all need to think about. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Lee, and I'm sure that we'll be able to touch on some of the points you raised as we go through, certainly in terms of the development delivery plan and the overall approach being considered for Central Winchester, which is better able to reach into those issues, wider considerations. While we are unapologetically human-centric in terms of what we're trying to do, we are also very mindful of the wider social environmental values in that area. But I'm sure Mr. Woolgar will be able to provide a bit more perspective on that as we go through. And nature has also had a big role in discussions about the station approach area as well. And Mr. Moore will be able to help with that. So we'll now move on to the presentations. I don't know if it's Mr. Bakey or Ms. Driscoll who will be presenting, but
it's just me today.
Right, I will let you get on with that.
Thank you, Chair. Last time we had this committee was back in February, and at that committee you had a presentation from all of our own colleagues around the baseline analysis that they'd undertaken for station approach. The general election then intervened because the June committee would have had a presentation on the concept master plan before it went out for public consultation. So apologies on behalf of others that you didn't get that before the public consultation started. So what we're doing today is just giving you an update on what the consultation's actually happening. And then all of us are going to take the committee through the actual concept master plan. And you can have your opportunity to have some comments there. So just by way of reminder, consultation is underway 16th of September to 27th of October. We've done a mail drop for nearly 600 homes around the station. The project has its own website that's been promoted with emails to the parish council distribution mailing lists. Hampshire Chronicle have had notifications, press releases, posters hung outside the station, letter to key stakeholders for one-to-one meetings, which have been happening in the last few weeks. full workshop last week with a wider team of the planning officers than rather just the one officer who's been sitting in the project team meetings. A couple of pop-up presences where the team were out handing out leaflets to members of the public who were either close to the station or any of the sites, the cattle market, using the station. This Saturday morning, we've got a drop-in session at Design Engine's offices, and there's been extensive social media promotions via Citizen Space. So quite a lot of activity in the last few weeks. I'm sure you'll have seen some of it. So the consultation closes on the 27th of October. After that, we'll be taking full account of all the comments that have been made. And I think we've had, am I right in saying, about 70 responses so far? And that was last week. And then we'll be working with Design Engine to finalise concept master plan in a format that will then come forward via the planning team to a cabinet report for endorsement of the concept master plan in spring of 25. You'll see that you've seen this picture before that just describes the overall journey that we've been through in terms of going back to 2022 capacity studies, the nearly 1,000 responses that were held then and received then, and that we've been taking the project through since. That does go through to 2026, where we will be thinking of bringing back how do we take these projects into delivery stage and discussion with Cabinet in 2026. So quick and short intro and just remind of what's gone before. Now I'd like to hand over to Oliver Moore from Design Engine Architects, who are the lead consultant. They, as you know, are locally based, and I'm sure he can pick up Councillor Lee's concerns and issues as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. So I've got a set of slides on the screen here. This is effectively the same slides that were presented to the public Teams meeting just last week. So I'm going to skip over some of them in terms of the fact that we've presented the baseline to this meeting before. So some of the background information in these earlier slides I can zip through. The vision, though, I think the statement here, what this project is aiming to define: a connected place, a lively place to live, work and play, a welcoming gateway showcasing the nature of the city and beyond, and a sustainable travel hub. So that, I think, is somewhat of a stretch goal compared to what the station area offers today. This was capturing what's in the local plan. Some of those have been taken forward to inform that vision, but I won't go over that in this forum. And you are all familiar, I think, with the red line of the site and the areas within its demise and outside of its demise. What is a concept master plan? This was touched on in Councillor Lee's comments. It isn't a detailed design. It can't be for the sites. It is a broad framework, a set of development parameters and guidelines that will inform future detailed developments, future detailed planning applications, which will be subject to all the relevant scrutiny through the planning and development process as and when they come forward. It's also important that it sets a framework for the entire site, even though it's not able to define phasing or which parts of the site may come forward on which timelines. That's subject to many other sort of viability and financial and individual landowners constraints moving forward. But it's something that sets a coherent aim for the whole area, which can hopefully be developed over time. We didn't start from scratch. We continued work. As Ken said, the public consultation that was done back in 2022 sought over 90% approval for these 4 key development principles and the sub-principles beneath them. And these have been our starting point for the themes and the proposals which we present today. A little bit of context, but I won't dwell on this. Obviously, the station is a key position within the city, more so today even than it was when it was created, when it was somewhat on the fringe of the city centre. It's now a key sort of dividing location between where people live and where people travel into in terms of the economic centre of the city. And obviously there's an increasing, notwithstanding COVID, there's an increasing commuting in and out of the city to jobs elsewhere compared to when the station was built. Some views here of the Station Hill area, approaching the station building itself from the 1900s and today. Just going to pause on this one, the key characteristics of Winchester. This is something that we've really drawn as inspiration for some of our town planning principles and the way that we've laid out buildings and development on the site. It's not just Keats who's recognised this, but this is a quote which we thought was quite apt and quite succinct. So Winchester, it feels today, and it was observed in the past, that it's a town nestled amongst the landscape and the natural environs, and that's a real key characteristic. You look at many of its streets, some of the trees, some of the green spaces within the city, and that's something that we want to identify as there are strengths and weaknesses within the existing site of the station approach area, but it's something we really want to reinforce, and in doing so hope to reinforce that sense of what the nature of the city of Winchester is, and also simultaneously kind of knit it in an area that isn't that characteristic of Winchester, better knit it into the city centre itself. So to the draft proposals of the concept master plan, organised around 6 key themes here: arrival, the experience of arriving at the station, or arriving to or leaving Winchester for daily commuters, visitors, residents, people new to the city. Living and working opportunities on the sites. The development offers the opportunity to improve new jobs and new places to live, as well as new spaces around those. Movement, so prioritising, resetting, if you like, some of the transport links in order to better reflect and better facilitate sustainable movement to and through the site. Vibrancy, so uses on the site and how that can move beyond its somewhat one-dimensional character at the moment, and provide new uses and new facilities for Winchester and for the sort of closer locale to define a new quarter around the station. Biodiversity, there are some assets on the site, there are some weaknesses on the site, and I think the key theme is to realise the requirement of 10% minimum biodiversity net gain, and how that can be achieved over a disparate set of sites in terms of how they might come online with phasing. So there's an overall strategy about what we want to try and achieve, and principles which we'd like development to adhere to. And character, so thinking about beyond what I said about greenery, what is some of the essential characteristics of the way Winchester City is planned or has evolved, and how can we replicate or reference those in the development layouts on these sites. So taking each of those in turn, the current experience of arriving into the station, I think we can agree, lacks some quality of experience and somewhat lacks identity. The number of times that I've been asked, working and walking through the site, working close to it on an almost daily basis, where's the city centre? How do I get to Winchester? Where do I find the cathedral? So arrival and orientation is clearly a key issue. How are we addressing that? We've identified the key arrival points, the landing spaces, if you like, and also the key routes that move beyond those and into the city or outwards into the local neighbourhoods. So without going through this diagram, which obviously is within the public consultation material that you can find online, opportunities to enhance existing arrival spaces, opportunities to create spaces where there probably isn't much in terms of a identified space. I'm thinking about the west of the station, for example, where the car parking, the car movements have encroached. There really isn't much space there at all. And again, in that vein, the northern area, where there's currently a viable route into the station for people to arrive and depart, but there's no sense of space or location there. You're walking through a multi-storey car park. And there are other aspects on this diagram about routes that link to those and the quality of those routes and some of the features along them. So some of these pocket parks, for example, to the west of the station here, thinking about how one approaches the station even before you get to that arrival space. What is the quality of that space? Is it dominated by cars? Are there opportunities to relieve existing areas of parking and improve the quality of the public realm? And are there areas of green space that we can either reinforce or introduce? And that goes for the Cattermarket site as well, which is somewhat of a green space vacuum. And we can introduce, I'll come back to this in the biodiversity slide, introduce new uses into those to better improve the amenity and the identity of those routes. I said the concept master plan is not a detailed design proposal. It can't be. So these visuals are illustrative only. They were done in terms of helping the public being able to realise what those principles might mean in practice. So the buildings are intentionally very much greyed out. They form just a backdrop. The emphasis is on the type of public space and the type of activity. So what this slide is showing is, if you look at the bottom left corner there of what you can see today, Station Hill dominated by tarmac, vehicle movements, bus movements. The emphasis would be shifted. This will be covered in the movement slide again in a minute, asking all the different user groups to somewhat take a step back, changing the priority of space here to be more pedestrian friendly, a more usable public space for pedestrians, limiting access for vehicles. Buses would be allowed, although on a shared surface, so the pedestrian priority. Taxis, other private vehicles would be redirected or contained elsewhere and not allowed to pass in the front proximity of the station here, which creates a potential space for more pedestrian friendly, more civic use, more public use for an arrival space for Winchester that can be supported by the use or reuse of new buildings and existing buildings, cafe, bar use, and pop-up space. Any of those could be developed within the detailed principles for the site opposite there on the Carfax. We'd introduce greenery, so animating those landscape spaces, which areas are necessarily hard from a movement point of view, but introducing new trees, as you can see in the foreground there, and a new planting, which can be biodiverse in order to provide additional facility for nature where there currently isn't some, and part of that is offsetting the necessary development on the sites. So we don't have visuals for all of the approaches, but there is a similar kind of principle for improving the quality of the other routes into the station. So Station North through the car park, Station West through the surface car parking adjoining the multi-storey car park, and also routes through the site. So the underpass for people moving across the station site has opportunities to be improved. Live and work. So this is land use effectively, and these sites are identified in the local plan as offering development opportunity for the benefit of the wider city, to bring value to the area with new flats, houses, and opportunities for different types of workspace. So how might that be best arranged on the site? And this is the principles that we've developed. So taking Carfax site as a beginning, there's opportunity for viable retail here, whether it's a convenience store facing the station, whether it's a cafe, a bar, pop-up market space on Station Hill. There's opportunity for workspace, I think, with it being in such close proximity to the transport links and also the bus. So it's a very accessible space for people to move to work. Some element of residential may well be desirable on that site, but really I think it's the site's one step further away. So residential opportunities on the site of the DIO, bordering Gladstone Street, Newbert Street, in the fullness of time, if very much dependent on Network Rail's car parking criteria and what opportunity they have or might evolve in the future to reduce their car parking quantum. There might be opportunities to consolidate some car parking on sites that are so geometrically constrained that they wouldn't offer very much in terms of development amenity, and other sites where they are a bit more accessible and perhaps offer a bit more potential could be developed, such as the Station West site there that runs parallel to Stockbridge Road. So that could be an opportunity to develop some residential units in there. Site 3 on this slide, so adjacent to the student residential development that was built in recent memory. It's key here that there would likely be a retaining and relocation of car parking there and development over, in order to make space for public realm around and improve the routes. But also it's a site that's quite well screened, and you could achieve, as the precedent shown as the student resi next door, buildings of a reasonable scale there, to offer either student residential or perhaps a hotel use. Cattle market itself, so at the moment the red line is, as shown, it excludes the Winchester Club. Notwithstanding that, there may be opportunities here to offer community uses that could either, complement what's in the Winchester Club there. The predominant development on this site would be residential, we feel. That could be a mix of, or would be a mix of, private, affordable, later living student residents. A key point on this slide is to emphasise that there is opportunity with the site levels to retain an element of car parking on this site, so that the site's current use as a key car park for people moving into the city centre and using the station. There's opportunity to retain that function alongside providing development in future. Again, just the visuals, I won't dwell on this, but it shows that development along the Andover Road edge there could offer something of a much improved access route into the station there, both in terms of better framing the views into, creating the streetscape, if you like, and the sense of coming into the city centre, and also I'll come on to in the movement slide, setting back from the road in order to offer opportunity for better transport links. A view of the site from the sort of upper Newborough Road area, looking back towards the Carfax site there. This shows the improvement of the links, coming back to that arrival sequence. So the links running uphill from the station, pedestrian cycle links through and over Upper High Street and down towards the West Gate. There's opportunity here with the red line, including the road, to widen some of the footways there, improve the cycling priority, change some of the flow of cars there in order to provide better, more accessible routes for people in terms of quality of space to get to the city centre. And then development, residential development shown on the right there on the DIO site, which could be in the form of flats, and potential office development in the form that's labelled A on the site there, which shows the area of the Carfax site which is furthest away from other development at the moment and furthest away from the listed building of the records office. Might be an opportunity of somewhere to increase mass. So vibrancy is a key feature which we'd be looking to inform the generation of a new station quarter, something where you don't just live or work, but somewhere that people would dwell and stop and pause on their way to somewhere else, on the way through the city. Not a destination in itself per se, but something of a waypoint on people's routes, a reason to pause, and also in order to capitalise on some of the throughput of commuters and some of the economic potential of the area of the city. This could be commercial use, but it can also be uses that are beneficial to the city. So we would suggest, prescribe, play parks, cultural uses, pocket parks, areas for public art, spaces for play, spaces for public amenity that might be open through the day and also into the evening. All of this improves the dwell time on the site and the sense of safety and population, as alongside the fact that there's opportunities for people to live and work there. How these uses would be orientated on the site is quite key in terms of the identity of place and the sense of place. So there's a diagram on the right here where it shows where the active facades would be, and creating uses that look inward into the sites to create pedestrian friendly, car free spaces in the centre of developments. For example, the Carfax site here, where there's the opportunity to both respect the Records Office as a listed building, retain some of the space within the site as it stands today in terms of open space, and then border and contain that, if you like, with new development which looks onto it and offers, you know, active use, which might be a cafe space or might be, you know, residential front doors, for example, cultural use within the Records Office. All of these can help animate these spaces and make them feel like they have identity, quality, and safety. So movement, how is the station utilised today, and how can that be support more sustainable transport links in the future? Data shows that the predominance of users arrive by walking. Car pickup is another secondary major use, and other uses are, you know, bus, cycling, etc. are could be better encouraged. This is a diagram about the reprioritization of access and space use to the station here. So this is the idea driven by our transport consultant and urban planning principles, that good, and it's borne out on many examples in the UK where stations have been redeveloped. Good places, good arrival spaces, good public forecourts to stations are ones where you address the sort of impacts of 20th century development, where cars have become increasingly the dominant factor, and they've become closer and closer and encroached closer and closer to the station entrances, asking everyone to take a step back and then putting provision back in a sort of an ordered hierarchy, if you like. So space for people would be paramount, space for people to park, access, move on cycles would be secondary, buses, larger vehicles obviously third, and have greatest access to proximity of the station. Taxis would be next in terms of moderating the distance and how close they can get to the station entrance, but still providing them in that hierarchy ahead of public vehicles and public drop-off in terms of access to the site. Limiting the or eliminating the access for public vehicles, private cars that is, with the exception of those with accessibility needs, to access the very front of the station there, and providing more viable and improved drop-off and accessible parking spaces in these purple areas, which is each of the car parks, of which actual walking distance to the station platforms and the ticket barriers is as good as or very similar to the locations at which cars can access today. So it's just changing that access diagram. That also has a benefit in terms of people accessing the station, so not encouraging, if you like, so much traffic through the Carfax junction, which in itself is problematic, encouraging people in cars to access the station from alternative locations. I won't go into some of the other points on that for time. Connectivity into wider transport routes across the city. There's a couple of points I'll just pick up here. So, for example, cattle market development can look to reinforce an informal route for cyclists and pedestrians that crosses it today. There may be opportunities to introduce a new crossing across the road there. That's something that sits outside of the red line, so we can't prescribe that as a concept master plan, but it's something that we're looking to encourage and facilitate with the layout of the site as it is today, which would be opposite Tesco's. The red line here shows that the opportunity, we know that there's opportunity that Hampshire County have looked at on Andover Road for future bus priority lanes, which might help to park a ride to developments to the north. Setting back we can't prescribe that within the public highway, it is outside the red line, but setting back the development within the red line on the cattle market site in order to future-proof and enable that ability to put a bus or cycle lane in on the Andover Road side is something that we think would be an important move within the concept master plan. There's opportunities in the long term here to look at the way that the Station West car parks are accessed. That might be limiting some of the access off of Stockbridge Road or supplementing it with other pedestrian, cycle, or even in the longer term car parking routes that might link to Andover Road. Again, that's recognising that there's developments north of the city that might increase the demand for access to the station from that direction. Also looking to relieve traffic flow through the Carfax junction. So these are not things that we can detail up or prescribe, because obviously the viability of development on Network Rail land is constrained by car parking restrictions. But it's something that we can look at the opportunity and plan in what might be possible in future, similar to some of the pedestrian routes that may be possible to create better links through to Peter Simmons College, of which there's currently quite a high footfall of people, which creates some congestion coming out of the west of the station. There may be opportunities to diversify the routes there, although these are constrained by land ownership opportunities or constraints at the moment. Biodiversity. So the station area has some features which are typical of Winchester's urban landscape. So there's a number of mature trees and lines that exist along roads and also railway lines. Our core proposal is to try and retain these key wildlife corridors and areas of biodiversity, areas of greenery and that offer views and the sense of the city as you move around the station area. So retaining these wherever possible is marked on these on this diagram with the large green arrows which show those avenues of trees, and supplementing them with improved green provisions within some of the hard landscaping spaces within the Station Hill area, within the West Car Park area, some of the access routes where it might be possible to remove car parking and improve space for people and pedestrian can be supplemented by planting and biodiverse planting, as well as improving some of the existing undergrowth and supporting those existing wildlife corridors around those trees. It's hard to get away from the fact that the Carfax site does possess a number of mature trees and quite a number of trees at the moment, and development on that site is going to inevitably lead to the removal of a number of those and offsetting those and replacing them, and indeed achieving the 10% net gain as mandated is going to be a challenge, and that needs to be looked at in terms of how the sites are phased on a site-by-site basis, or even a phase-by-phase basis. For example, there could be a complementary relationship with the Cattle Market site there, where it currently doesn't offer many trees or much green space, very much limited to around the fringes of the car park that exists today. And the plan for that could be introduce new pocket parks and play spaces and green spaces, as well as retaining some of the key trees, for example, the one on the Andover Road, Worthy Road junction there, and some that exist along the Andover Road, but also opportunities to introduce new trees along the Andover Road between development and within those pocket parks. So this is a view, again, very much illustrative of what could happen, but the opportunity to take the centre of the Carfax site there and re-landscape some of the levels in order to provide more usable space, more identifiable space, a place, if you like, for people to sit and dwell, but also to furnish that with as much greenery and biodiverse planting as possible, creating opportunity for quality space for nature amongst the new development. Similarly, a view of the park off of Andover Road, so this would be opposite Tesco's, and that might be supported by, as I said earlier, a new crossing that crosses Andover Road at that point and reinforces that pedestrian and cycle route across the site that exists informally today. Character. The station is an existing landmark in the city, but is it one that kind of complements the town centre and the feeling of Winchester is something to be debated. I think Stephen B would offer from a heritage perspective and a planning perspective that there isn't much about the station approach area that really reinforces the character of Winchester. And we sort of set off as architects and urban planners and our team to think about, well, what are the key characteristics of Winchester that we can look to introduce to address that. I feel Winchester is, if you look beyond the styles of the buildings, which are, you know, somewhat typical of other towns in the Hampshire area of similar ages, there's some key urban movement characteristics of the types of spaces, the alleyways, the spaces that open and close, the way that you get a series of spaces and size of spaces and views as you process, if you like, through the city. It's quite a permeable city blocks in Winchester, certainly the older bits, the bits that you would say embody the character of Winchester. So that sense of being able to meander through and discover spaces and views is something that we'd like to embrace in the development parameters for this site. How to do that? I mean, this is just a kind of you know, what's the word? It's not stereotyped, but kind of exaggerated example here. So on the left is you know, a very dense kind of rectilinear urban blocks placed as close as they can together to you know, just provide physical access between them, but very little quality of space in the routes between. The proposal instead would be to stagger and set back and fragment the development in order to create squares, spaces, routes, places to sit, spaces, if you like, rather than routes between the buildings. That has challenges in terms of the overall development footprint and may lead to the need for certain elements of a site to go higher in terms of delivering the same development quantum, which was informed, as Ken said at the beginning, by a capacity study, which was kind of given to us as a reference point in terms of the quantum of development that's desirable on this site, on these sites as a whole. Greenery and nature in Winchester. So we think that you know, drawing on that quote from Keats at the beginning, the sense of nature in amongst the development of Winchester is quite evident. There's some really glorious large trees which pepper the city's landscape, and almost, I mean, there's always exceptions, but a large majority of the streets are not buildings on both sides, but they're buildings either facing a green edge, a verge, a row of trees, or heavily punctuated by really mature trees that, you know, if you like, dominate or provide a viewpoint if you want to notice them to the streets themselves. And that's something, a key character that we want to reinforce in the development. Conscious that a lot of these trees are quite old, over 100 years old, and they may, some are within public ownerships, a lot are within private gardens. So there's no guarantee for the city that these will prevail and or be replaced. So we feel it's kind of incumbent on large developments in the city that the station approach area is one where we can identify areas for new planting of significant trees that can grow to maturity and mimic some of these characteristics we see around the city streets. So again, that's the diagram here is somewhat kind of stereotyped, but it's about varying that street line. So creating the spaces, you're not just squeezing small trees between buildings and the roadway, but you're setting back buildings at certain points along the streetscape in order to create space for planting, space for entrances to be set back, space for greenery to address the street, space for trees that are visible to the city, not just to the residents of the site. So how do those principles play out in terms of mass, heights, scale, density? Well, you can't get away from the two or three factors we've woven together here, which is the need to achieve biodiversity net gain, which has become mandated since some of the previous developments on the site. So the quantum of footprint on the site is going to be different in the way that space is built and distributed. Our approach is drawing on those principles we just said about how you create permeability, is to actually limit the footprint of buildings on the site to create spaces between places between buildings, reinforcing routes across the site, And in doing so, you necessarily, if you like, to provide the development and the aspirations within the local plans there, require an increase in height across the site, sometimes increasing above the guidelines within the local plan, which suggests 3 or 4 stories as a kind of datum. The concept master plan would like to suggest that that is not inappropriate within the constraints of a the careful planning considerations for buildings of quality, and good design, and looking at the location of landmark buildings or additional height as being appropriately positioned on the site. For example, on the Carfax site here, we're suggesting that's furthest away from the Hampshire County Archives Office, which is one of the listed buildings, and furthest away from some of the existing residences, if you like, that border the site and that look onto it. This is just again a view looking at one of those buildings that could be more than 5 stories or 5 stories or more. Cattle Market site, we would look to address buildings on Worthy Lane with lower rise buildings that kind of respect the character of the high conservation area there. But conversely, we think where there are existing buildings of height and scale, many 20th century developments around the junction of Andover Road and Worthy Lane, that's a location where it would be appropriate to suggest higher buildings could be accommodated within the site. It's the low point of the site, if you like. So when coming down Andover Road, it's where buildings would have better stature if they have additional height. And so in terms of the sense of arriving into the city and the pattern of buildings that line the street, we feel that's a good location for that on the Cattle Market site there. So this is a suggestion of that. You can see in the foreground here some of the 3-story buildings which might be facing the 2-story houses on the existing houses on the left hand side of Worthy Lane there as you look towards the station. And in the distance there you can see both development on the Carfax site and where a landmark building, for example, might provide emphasis and a variety of roofscape, really. My colleague who has lived in the city and worked in the city for many years longer than me, Richard, would be keen to express the idea that Winchester and cities in general with the new development, it's somewhat an increasingly secular society. There's the opportunity doesn't exist as much to vary the streetscape with spires and height that may have happened in the past. And all too often the new development is set at a particular flat datum in order to meet development quantum. We would propose or support a concept master plan that proposes a more diverse approach here, where pockets of height can be appropriate where they are offset by lower development elsewhere, where it's needed to be sensitive to surroundings, such as this view on the screen. And as long as that height is achieved in a sense of design quality and appropriateness in terms of the views. That's not to say that it's invisible from views, that it offers something positive to reinforce views around it. Which brings us on to the final set of slides here. Character and heritage impact. Now, I'm not a heritage specialist. Steve B is on our team, who's both a local practitioner, a planner, heritage advisor, worked extensively within Winchester and nationally. So excellent sort of authority to speak on these matters. I'm paraphrasing him. He said that the quality of heritage assets around, or certainly within the Red Line, is very limited. Around the Red Line, there are some assets. So we've got St Paul's Church, which is a listed building. We've got the station building itself, which isn't listed but has some qualities and has some heritage features that have survived over time. We've got the Hampshire Records Office here, which is now a listed building, 20th century listed building. And then we have the conservation area and the Winchester Club, which border the Cattle Market site here. The Winchester Club, we think the relevance of that building as a heritage asset has diminished over time with its current condition and the setting of it having changed so much since its origination as a kind of house within a large garden. So there are numerous views to the site, which we think ultimately can be improved with new development, providing that it's of suitable quality. And we've also looked at the wider views around the town from, viewpoints such as St Catherine's Hill and Blue Ball Hill, St Giles's Hill. And whilst the site is visible and development may be visible from some of those locations, our proposal would be not to make the site's development invisible, but rather to ensure that it has some quality to it, which provides a positive impact around its settings and the existing heritage assets that are retained. So this is an overview, really trying to show how some of those ideas could be visualised as building mass, as and when parcels of land could be taken forward, and how that would all knit together to provide a coherent vision for the station approach area. I think I'll leave it there. Actually, the last slide was just about feedback and online consultation processes, of which I think we're all aware of.
Great, thank you very much indeed. So quite a lot to digest there. I suggest we take it in sort of sections. First of all, there was the short introduction by Ken Bakey, which looks at the process that we're in. I don't know if people have any questions on that. Yes, Councillor Godfrey.
I'm not sure. It didn't mention in my presentation. I don't know everything myself, but the number of people who use the station or station area doesn't seem to be well represented by 70 people giving feedback on the consultation. Should we be worried that so few people have responded to the consultation so far?
I think that's a fair question. Obviously, at the beginning of the process, when we were shaping the priorities, we had a lot more, but maybe Mr. Bakey can provide some perspective.
We're still open for consultation. I think there were a few people who said not again, and in terms of we've seen this before in terms of the rather extensive capacity work that's been underway. And so I think, I've gone through, I listed out, and I think we can give you that full list if you wish. I think it might be on the slide anyway. I'm struggling to think about what else we might be able to do to convince people to respond. We had people taking leaflets, I think the team told me, a little bit out of politeness, who maybe were rushing through the station to either catch a train or catch a bus elsewhere. But I mean, so we've got one final drop-in session. We did have 39 people, I think, last week online for an online Q&A. I don't know how well attended that is compared to previous online events that the team have done. I think that we just wait and see what comes back at the end of the consultation. We've still got another 2 weeks of that to go.
Thank you. I mean, I think
Mr. Moore made a very good point, which was emphasised in the member briefing back in last month when we saw the presentation slides. It was very, very good slides, in my opinion, the presentation board. That this was developing a concept master plan. It was not a proposal, and I think that may be curbing people's enthusiasm for responding, because, well, we're not responding to anything tangible, which may be limiting what they want to say. When we come forward with a planning application, they'll be banging on the doors, I'm sure. But how do we get the right balance?
I think that's a good question. I mean, I think there is a point, which is you really want lots of engagement right at the beginning when you're setting the overall direction. And then if you've done a good job and you've listened to people and you've reflected what they tell you when you're scoping what you're doing, then there's less to kind of irritate people and get them all triggered and responding later on. But I don't know. I mean, Mr. Moore, you've seen a wide. This is not your first rodeo, is it? What's your perspective in terms of what your feeling is about how people are responding, and in particular, you've had in person, although the in person is on Saturday, is that right?
Yes, the drop-in session at our office is on this Saturday, 19th. So that's, I think, 10 till 1.
So that's an important event, because I think I don't, and appreciate your sort of advice on this, but it's quite a lot to digest. It's a lot harder to respond to when you're asking people things like, how do you go to the station? How would you like to go to the station? When you're saying, here's what we're proposing. So what's your experience? Do people prefer to respond through sort of accompanied, online or in-person responses? How does this feel to you as a project in terms of your historic experience?
Yeah, I think there's some truth in all of those. Ken's point that, well, we're only partway through the consultation period, and I know that people who really want to absorb the information, measure their responses, maybe craft a response with colleagues or friends in a from a group or society perspective, would tend to submit their responses towards the end of that period. So time to think. I also think there's merit in Councillor Godfrey's observation there that this is, I think, correct me, only the second kind of concept master plan to come forward, second or third, in the city of Winchester, and so there's still some mystery, I think, to the public, the general public, about what a concept master plan is and isn't, and what it contains. And so knowing exactly what they're commenting on and to what effect, I think that is unusual. And to be honest, that's unusual for us. We as practice have done many consultations, more often on a development proposal, a planning application, if you like, when you can be much more concrete about what is and isn't being proposed, and the feedback can be much more direct and directly evidenced in changes to that. Whereas we are trying to define a framework which necessarily has flexibility within it in order not to, it's to guide and promote development in the future rather than constrain it unduly.
Thank you. Any other questions about the sort of introductory section talking about the process we're in? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, thank you. And because I'm a substitute, excuse me if I missed this point. Much of what we've heard today, and it's very interesting, there's a lot to take in, involves land that is with the railway authority. Are they at the table? Because otherwise, if I'm responding, and I think that's a great idea to move the car park, but they're not playing, you're leading me to believe that that's a potential outcome, but you can't necessarily deliver it. So I'm just trying to understand their status in terms of what we're asking people to reply to at this time. Thank you.
I think that may be one for Mr. Bakey.
Thank you. And so previously they were clearly at the table and they were helping fund the capacity studies, Councillor Horrell. So this time round, they're not funding anything, but they are still at the table. We very specifically asked them before we went out to public consultation, are they happy that this material is shared in the public? Because they are interested to see what their land holdings could achieve. They are constrained by the Department of Transport's requirement not to lose any car parking spaces. That's the current regime, and that may change. At one point last year, late last year, we thought that might change, but it didn't happen in the end. So they are interested to see what people's reactions are. They've been interested to see the capacity of their land. And if you look at the way they've developed their car parking facilities, they have decked over some areas, but not other areas. And maybe one of the more obvious areas they could have decked over would have been the very long car park to the northwest, but they've chosen not to do that. So they're very interested, they're very happy that this material was out in the public realm, and both Network Rail and London Continental Railway are still talking to us. And if things change, then that may help them actually demonstrate the case for change as well, but also gives them an idea of what could happen in Winchester going forward. This concept master plan isn't just for next year or 5 years' time, it will be there for probably 10 years' time. So maybe things will change in that longer period of time.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, I had a similar question actually, and it was around, and you've kind of confirmed that they are happy to still be within this master plan and the red line, but you've also mentioned, or certainly Mr. Moore mentioned, the DIO site, and I think at previous meetings we hadn't had any contact with them, but have we now done that, and are they still, you know, what's the situation there, I suppose?
Again, they've been part of the team, and again, we asked them to help fund the study, but they said they didn't have any funding available, but very happy for their land to be incorporated into this exercise. So we're still in dialogue with them. They are having a look across all of their land assets. A lot of focus obviously on Sir John Muir Barracks at the moment, but they still wanted to see the capacity of their site, what could that contribute to the future of Winchester, and it actually help them internally with their own planning exercises.
Thank you. If we now move on to the design engine presentation, we've got the documents that were circulated in advance that have the same content, slightly differently organised, but I suggest we use that as a reference point. The introductory section, I can't imagine there's much to discuss because it's just recapping what we already know. The 6 key themes, I mean, obviously we all have a chance to respond to the consultation, but if there's any reaction to those: arrival, movement, living work, character, vibrancy and biodiversity. Councillor Porter.
Thank you. You talk about arrival, but in the narrative in here, it talks about the barrier of the railway, and people often use it to travel through to, as you say, the 2 halves of the city, or the city. It almost feels like the boundary, the outer walls of the city, doesn't it, really, the railway? So that travelling through is also important to, I think, to the whole site as well. And you've talked about the way in which you come to the site and then you go underneath it. But are you are you thinking about the impact of the Stockbridge Road as well in that design? Because you talked about those bodies of places, but not the Stockbridge Road, which effectively is the road that goes through it, and actually St Paul's Hill, I suppose, over the top of it.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I completely understand and agree where you're coming from. The red line of the concept master plan is limited and doesn't include the Hampshire County Council highways areas, which would be Carfax Junction, Stockbridge Road, Andover Road, etc. Our baseline analysis definitely showed and identified that the railway is a barrier, and the station area itself on the screen there presents a number of barriers to movement from east to west across the city, but without having
Not in your gift, that's what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. Without having those areas of highway within the influence of the concept master plan, all we can do is be cognizant of what plans Hampshire County might have for them in the future, of which we know, they've looked at studies for the Carfax Junction and also Andover Road, a little bit for not the entirety of Stockbridge Road, but for the area underneath where it passes under the railway line there, through the tunnel, if you like.
So for the moment, we've got to think of those as they are. They may well be.
Yeah, and the concept master plan can only really be cognizant that they may evolve and change in the future, rather than prescribing that as part of the concept master plan proposals, because, as you said, they're not in the gift, they're outside of the red line.
Okay, thank you, that's helpful.
Councillor Horrell, you stuck your hand up, or do you want to save when we move into discussing each of the themes in turn?
I can save it, Chair, until each theme if you're happy.
Right, okay, thank you. Any other questions on the sort of the choice of the 6? Otherwise, let's move on to arrival, which was the section that looked at the arrival space. Oh, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. I mean, at the moment, the sense of arrival is just not there, is it? You know, both front and back, there are all sorts of issues. And particularly at the front of the station at the moment with the trees and the barriers. I mean, as ward councillors, we're often asked questions about why are the concrete blocks there and why are the barriers all around the trees, and it's a long, and it seems almost to be an intractable problem. And I know that we don't own the land around there, but I'd be interested in hearing your views as to how we might move that on and get a much better sense of arrival, particularly at the front, but also the back of the station. You know, the upside is equally unwelcoming, in my view.
Yes, well, in terms of the trees on Station Hill, I think we and the constraints, barriers around them, we're very aware of that. We've understood from conversations with South West Rail and Network Rail in the past about what some of the background for that is. The concept master plan sort of necessarily by definition takes a long-term view of the site, so we're not prescribing, you know, short-term ways to address those, but I understand there are, you know, options that South West Rail are looking at to address that particular problem in the short term, hopefully, probably in advance of any concept master plan developments to come through. Our job is to really set a vision for what that area might be in the end game, if you like, so that anything so if you like, it can help inform what they might do in the short term, so that it's not, you know, sunk costs or sort of, so it's kind of future proofed, if you like. The area to the west, I mean, comes back to a question from someone else about how up for it Network Rail are. I think it is constrained by their requirements for car parking spaces, and so there needs to be very careful studies done on their part as to whether any car parking could be surrendered in order to offer the opportunity to improve space and the sense of place on that west side, because multi-storey car park is unfortunately built so close to the station now that once, if it's not the car park itself, it's the vehicle movements and tracking that's required to access it that really constrain the you know, what area you have, what elbow room you have within close proximity of the station entrance on the west side there. So that's kind of a prerequisite to something happening on that side, notwithstanding the proposal in the scheme here that car park could coexist with a reimagining of the spaces under the trees in the open area, which was on one of the slides there, where there is an opportunity, should a number of parking spaces be able to be released, to do some public realm and approach and arrival improvements alongside the existence of that multi-storey car park, even before you get to the end game proposal, which might be to use that land for residential development.
Oh, it's all going on. Councillor Godfrey.
On the subject of arrival, I think it's an interesting concept that's been developing here about the front of the station along Station Hill. My concern is using the Station Hill area primarily for pedestrians, and developing that as an interesting concept, seems to be disrupted by the presence of buses going through one way or another. Is that, yeah? Are we not losing the benefits of one and limiting the transport hub function of the other? So it's neither fish nor fowl.
That's a good challenge. Buses. I think the intention is to make it pedestrian friendly, but bus permeable. But tell us more. It's actually two sections really, isn't it?
I
It's arrival
think-
and
Yeah.
movement.
I think that's a good synopsis, Martin. I'm probably not the best equipped person to give both barrels in response to that question, which is a good one. That would be our transport consultant, but I think it is a tried and tested and arguably proven approach to sort of semi-pedestrianised pedestrian priority space with buses moving through. So I think it is something that both reflects the priorities of the Winchester movement strategy in terms of the hierarchy of you know, what transport modes have precedence and have you know, claim on areas of the city, particularly ones that are so sort of contested as the Station Hill, and I think it's something that has been shown to be viable in other areas. So it definitely needs careful handling, but I think it's not a novel solution. It's something that can be achievable.
Thank you. We're still on arrival. Councillor Porter.
Just very quickly, we did, oh, sorry, you started off by saying that people come out of the station, say, where's the city? Are we certain that our exit from the station will be as strong a message as our entry to the station on both sides?
That's a good question, and one that came up in the public meeting the other day. Now, we can draw diagrams with arrows that head off towards the city centre, but again, the red line limits our scope. It would be great to think that there was a wider city public realm improvement strategy that could grow out of this project or would be alongside the project, but that's not the case within the realms of this project as it stands. So what we can do is we can ensure that the quality of place and the identity of arriving somewhere when you come out of the station is so much better than it is today. So this is sort of a backwards answer, but that someone comes out and they're already somewhere that's, I've arrived somewhere in Winchester, and then they might, as a secondary step, go and find the cathedral. So their immediate need to go and find the city centre is somewhat tempered by the fact that they've arrived somewhere of some quality in the first place. Now, that's not to say that we're not going to improve wayfinding and suggest the routes, as far as we can influence them, are improved. And for example, that visual that showed the widening of the pedestrian access and more improved planting and better definition as a route that will catch your eye and draw you up the hill there and eventually lead you over to Westgate. These are all parts of the proposal, but within the constraints of what's in the red line.
Thank you, Councillor Horrell. Oh, sorry, Mr. Bates.
I was just going to add that although the boundary has been drawn quite tight to individual sites, the consultant team have obviously been working through the other strategy documents that the council has. So the movement strategy, for instance, the LC whip, have all been made available. So they are picking up these things that actually will then contribute to that wider process of how people move through and beyond the area. So just want to reassure the committee that they have got those documents, read them, and actively involved in commenting on them as local residents as well, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So the concept master plan is to be aware of those. It can't prescribe works beyond the red line, but it is cognizant of all of those developments and strategies outside, and is in sync with them. Doesn't prejudice any of them.
Thank you.
And if I understand, actually the conversation is going both ways as well, so that there is a conversation back to the people working on the movement strategy about what it is you have in mind. And similarly, for example, as soon as you're talking about the west side of the station, things like the full flood livable neighbourhood are absolutely looking at that area in great depth. We need to make sure that conversation works in both directions. Councillor Horrell.
Chair, it's we have the 6 themes, but when they all come together, there's a multiplicity of activity across the site. So you don't have to do everything. You could do one part or another, providing it all was comprehensive, as it were. Is there a prioritisation on the sort of total map that you have there of the most important place to start? If we sort of put the pebble in the pond, where would it be? Where would we begin? Or does that all have to be one great project?
Shall I take that question, Councillor Harold? I think it's one of the next steps in terms of the overall phasing. Without speaking out loud, I think, the obvious place is the Carfax site, but we do have to be conscious of what else is happening with things like the Northern Park and Ride. There are some things that have to happen, I think, before some of these sites can happen and come forward. And then we're left with obviously the Network Rail sites as well. The City Council own two of the 4 or 5 sites. So we are restricted in some ways by land ownership issues and when those sites can come forward. But there is I'd say a pretty obvious one. It would be the Carfax site, I think, to start. But that does require some other things to happen first.
Thank you.
I think there's been other bits of work that sit outside this, that, for example, say that you need to be reducing traffic coming in from the north before you're able to decommission or to make major changes to the cattle market and the Worthy Lane car parks, because they certainly, otherwise you start sending loads of cars into the one-way system and that joined up approach. But I think having a vision for what we can do as we gradually find ways of still ensuring that it's easy for people to access the centre, but that they're not needing to drive their cars into the centre, is really important. Anything more on the whole arrival discussion? One quick thing, and actually gives us a chance to give a very quick plug so I was at a meeting a few days ago in Shawford with South Western Rail, because tomorrow, and I would like everybody to do this, tomorrow there is a vote for the World Cup of Stations, and the fantastic community cafe that is there is an entrant. And so I would ask everybody listening, all local architects, design engine, the jigsaw team, to go and vote in that. But actually, while I was there, I took the opportunity to say, what are you going to do about the front of Winchester Station? And the City Council is due to get a proposal back from South Western Railway in the next few weeks. So that was the point of that. But I thought I'd do a quick plug for the Shawford World Cup of Stations, where I think we can say there's cross-party alignment in the desire to see them triumph over all other stations in the whole of the UK. Do we have cross-party alignment on that?
Absolutely. I saw an article on the current World Cup holder in Western Scotland. It's the most extraordinary station, and we would want to be associated with that in any way.
So it's coming home, I think, is our message to the people of Winchester. Right, let's keep moving, and we need to crack on because we have central Winchester to talk about as well. Live and Work was about the repurposing of uses across the site. Do people have any questions or comments on that? I think it is a well-made case and fairly self-explanatory. Similarly, a lot of the information about vibrancy that we talked about. Any questions on that? And again, movement, I think we've touched on, but I know it's an area of huge interest. Lots of hands going up. Councillor Horrell first out of the traps. So, Councillor Horrell, what's your question about movement?
Well, Chair, you touched on it just a moment ago. Without Park and Ride in the north, the implications on the Andover Road are obviously significant, and also the pinch points that we have at the bridge and other places as you come along that road. So you talk about priority that people may feel is good for cycling and walking, but I don't know how we deliver some of those without some of those other improvements that are actually further out. So my question, I'm pleased Mr. Beaky was saying that those other documents, you're considering, but you're not necessarily driving the final outcome of that. And also the input of Sir John Moore Barracks and circa 1,000 homes, which was not on the table when the movement strategy was put together, and that influx potentially to the city that would result from that. So how is that all being balanced with some interesting ideas here, but those roads and those pinch points from an infrastructure point of view are substantial, and how we're going to overcome those?
Who wants to? Well, I may know more about movement strategy than some. I think the point with the Sir John Moore Barracks application, and Councillor Porter may have further perspective, is that it's expected to wash its own face in terms of traffic pressure on the city centre, which is why we are, why the council, both councils have said there needs to be a park and ride on that side as part of reducing the traffic flow into the centre. One of the reasons, and so the movement strategy has obviously had that as a long-term objective, and we are yet to see the full impact as to how what will happen north of the railway bridge. I think one of the reasons why an important conversation, a joined-up conversation, has been necessary is, as Mr. Moore mentioned, our master plan widens the road. I mean, we've made choices, I think, in terms of how that land is used to say we will give up land in our car park so that the road can be widened and there is space for a bus lane, an uphill cycle lane, and other such. I hope I've fairly summarised that. Do you want to correct me if I'm wrong? Or
No, that's absolutely right. Another point to note is that the other developments outside of our remit which are going to improve or add bus services, bus offer into the city centres is only as good as the maintaining the quality of bus service in and around the station. And so a core part of this concept master plan is to ensure that one of the reasons that bus remains in front, passing in front of the station, Councillor Godfrey, is so that it can address Carfax Junction on its own traffic light, so it has that bus gate priority into that junction. It doesn't have to queue up with all the other cars coming around the other side of Sussex Street. So maintaining that was one of the key assets, if you like, for the bus network and bus movements in and around the station. So that's one of the reasons that's driven that particular proposal. But improving the bus stops and the amenity for bus users on Station Hill, and also designing in, I mean, it's not covered in detail in these, but designing in the flexibility to manoeuvre the layout of buildings on the Carfax site to potential to add additional bus stops in future, which is a capability that can play into the wider bus strategy of Winchester, which might be pertinent when some of the central Winchester developments kind of come to fruition. That's being built in as sort of future proofing, if you like, the bus capacity around the station approach area.
Thank you. Any other questions about the station area on movement? Oh, Councillor Aaron.
I just wanted to ask about parking, which is a very, I know of all the resident comments I get, a lot of them about parking in all over Winchester. But I just wanted to ask, in the 70 replies, is parking a major thing, or is it a bit like how I'm feeling about it? I love the idea of taking the cars away and pedestrian, but if I lived 5 miles out of Winchester and wanted to come and use Winchester to get to London or to shop and so on, I might, rue the fact that all this parking, there's a huge amount of parking around the station. A lot of it seems to be going under this plan. Has there been a reaction to that, or are people still in theory pro it and yet in reality may object later on?
I don't think it featured massively. There was 1 or 2 comments, I think maybe last week online, and a couple of comments that we've definitely received about residents parking is needed much more than commuter parking, but so it's not been a massive issue for us just yet.
I mean, I wouldn't dispute that it is a key issue across those sites. There's a lot of car parking on there at the moment, and it's not going to be without impact as these schemes came forward. The couple of points to make, that this isn't one development that's going to happen overnight. It would be necessarily phased, and the impact of that would be moderated because of that. Where you start, your question earlier, that's something for economics really, rather than for the designers. And so that would influence that impact. But I'm aware, as I'm sure others are, that there's a sort of wider plans for car parking across Winchester city centre in terms of how that evolves in the future. And we're very cognizant that the Cattle Market site is a very important part of that puzzle. And so we've made both, there's opportunities suggested by the level changes on those sites, but we've also made kind of great efforts to look at where you can integrate car parking, but also build development over the top. So I think what's not, in our view, desirable is to leave large areas of these sites as solely surface car parking. I don't think that's a good use in the long term of the value of the site for what it offers Winchester, but I think it is worthwhile looking at any opportunities there are to integrate parking economically underneath development, and the Cattle Market site certainly offers that in certain areas. And as that site might get developed and evolve the site over time, there might be other opportunities that can be sought there that sort of further maintain that ability. It's also worth noting that there's other car parks around. On the weekends, the station car parks themselves are not as heavily used as during the week, and there's the Winchester Hotel car park next to it as well.
Very much. You, Councillor Godfrey.
Having worked above a car park in a large office block, I know we had to pay extra careful attention to our fire safety. So it may not be the ideal solution for particularly with electric vehicles. I'm grateful for the designers and the work they're doing to explain how passengers, visitors to the station will travel in and out, and I'm slowly beginning to understand it myself. The bus direction through the station area, I think, is important, particularly in terms of the route through Carfax and how we optimize that congestion point, as well as make it Station Hill an attractive area. But that's something which I will have to study a bit further with the assistance of the transport expert. And I do like the emerging plans for how the car drop-off is being approached. Although I'm not quite sure if the people coming from the south of Winchester area will feel quite the same yet. But that's to be considered during the feedback. If they don't come back and tell us it's madness, and you're not going to get much change.
Thank you very much indeed.
Sorry, one other thing is on taxis. We have the ongoing conflict between taxis and minicabs. And I would hope that the reference to taxis here does mean Hackney licensed cabs, and that we're giving them premium access to the area around the station, and that minicabs would be expected to follow the car drop-off and pick-up route. Only because we're asking our Hackney cabs to provide that premium service. We don't want to diminish that and give anyone access to their charging points of their close proximity. I think that would be useful just to emphasize that.
I think that's a useful reminder. I mean, I think the days of complete confusion where we had minicabs next to the station and taxi cabs opposite the station are now over, and that's now been resolved. But it is a useful reminder that we certainly don't want to get back there. I want to keep moving.
I'm just going to say, and also because we don't know what form taxi services will take in the future. In 20 years' time, we may be on a completely different.
Riding around in one of Elon Musk's robo taxis or possibly rocket ships. Anyway, let's keep moving. I realise we're running a bit behind, but biodiversity, any questions? Anything to add, particularly because obviously there were points raised by Councillor Lee earlier. Asking your
I
question,
just want to
Councillor Walter.
reassure Councillor Lee really that the tree cover on that site is not bad, but actually I agree with the comment you've just made, which is that the tree cover not only provides the biodiversity but also adds value. I understand completely what you're saying there, and I'm sure that the place team think exactly the same.
Yes, I should add a bit of detail on a couple of points. So one, there is a it's been deemed beyond the remit of the concept master plan because of the timescales of not knowing exactly when this plan will come to fruition to undertake a baseline analysis for the biodiversity survey as it stands today. That was a conversation we had at the outset. It is known through conversations with the tree officers at Hampshire that and Winchester that some of the trees, whilst there is good coverage of trees on site, some of them are not in the most healthy of conditions in terms of specimens, and they are compromised by some of the ground conditions and the car parking below them. So it's not all that it seems in terms of the health of the trees and therefore their ability to, in the long term, continue to offer a natural habitat to the biodiversity that exists. I would also want to just further the presentation by addressing some of Councillor Lee's comments. I think there's obviously a plan, there's quite a lot in it already, but there are some details that we perhaps don't emphasise enough in here. We've thought about the green and blue infrastructure, so both opportunities to create SUDs and sustainable urban drainage systems, permeable drainage at ground level and within some of these new landscaped areas and some of the existing areas of streetscape. That would be something that's a detail that we developed as individual schemes, plans for individual sites came forward. Also, the green and blue roof opportunities is something that we can suggest and reinforce within the concept master plan proposals for development. So some of these buildings do have flat roofs, which would offer the opportunity for green roofs, which are obviously inhabited roofs where you can provide biodiversity, and blue roofs, which are not mutually exclusive with green roofs, but offer the opportunity to capture and contain rainwater on the roof of a building and delay its release into the drainage system, which would help with flood mitigation. So those are technologies that exist, not unique to this master plan at all, but along with energy saving fabric first principles for the design of the buildings. These are standards that we can refer to, at least today's standards, within the concept master plan, and a part of that aim in one of the development principles to move towards a net zero carbon city in the future.
Thank you, that's very helpful, and I think, well, certainly Councillor Lee, but actually the rest of us will be very pleased to see those greater details as we move later in the process. Good, and then the last area, the last bullet point, big area, is character, which I think was more about providing insight to the area. I don't know if people have any questions about that. It seemed fairly self-explanatory and very helpful, but
one tiny point, which I did raise this time last year, right.
Maybe we should just call it the Southwestern Hotel or whatever it was called before. But yes, that is a useful reminder. Thank you. We will get that corrected. Good. I think we've now been through everything. Do people want to make any last comments? Councillor Horrell.
Chair, sorry, just looking at the questionnaire and the design of that. I was slightly intrigued to see you only had a 4-point scale. You had 2 preferences, sort of, above the line, but only 1 below. Unusual in a way of doing a survey. You ask a couple of questions on each of the areas, but you have 10 questions about the individual, and I'm sort of intrigued as to why my sexual orientation is fundamental to the the consultation. So I was just questioning how the questionnaire was put together, and the sort of the way it was constructed, because that will form in many cases how it is responded to. Thank you.
I mean, I think that's a point of overall equalities. And I suppose the reason we ask those questions is to make sure that we have a representative sample, and that all different groups are represented. And what we found, I think, particularly the first round of work, was that when we started to break out, for example, by age and by disability, we were getting insights that we wouldn't have achieved otherwise, and in the past would not have got, because we weren't asking those questions. So that's historically the reason why we're now embedding that in how the council works, as part of our equality to diversity and inclusion, particularly inclusion, and making sure that all different groups and different voices are heard. Since that's probably a policy question. Oh, yes, Mrs. Adey.
Thank you. You're exactly right. But just to confirm that they're optional questions as well, so you wouldn't have to fill those in if you choose not to. You could choose to opt out for those questions.
Just interesting, we have 12 questions on the actual concept master plan, and we have 10 about us. So the balance is just interesting.
I mean, we were at pains to, I mean, firstly, it's a Winchester Council comms team questionnaire, not a design energy questionnaire, but we were collaborating in the construction of it. And we were very conscious that there's a lot of information that we put forward under a number of themes. And so in order to be able to offer the opportunity for comprehensive response, but not overwhelm people with, you know, if you imagine there's 16 boards, the 6 themes, umpteen sort of points of interest under each theme, you could end up with quite an intimidating questionnaire. So the nuance is that each of those 12 questions, if you say, actually has multiple choice answers, and you can provide, should you wish to, quite a lot of rich feedback for each one of those questions. Whereas I presume, by contrast, the personal information is much more black, white, yes, no kind of responses.
I think, oh, Councillor Aaron.
Just very quickly to say, I just find this all very exciting. It's I really enjoyed looking through it. I think it's the actual presentation is very clever and very well done. And I think that, you know, if some or parts of, or hopefully all of this comes about, it will be fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. I think it's a very useful summary. Is there anybody else who wants to say anything? Otherwise, thank you very much, Oliver, for a 3rd degree cross-examination and for all the work that you and your colleagues have put into this project. It's greatly appreciated, and greatly also appreciate the time you've given us this afternoon in terms of answering all the questions. And I hope that's been useful to give a sense of where councillors are and the kind of questions that we have. But very, very helpful presentation, and like Councillor Aaron, very inspired and excited by the work you're doing. So thank you very much indeed. Looking forward to how we integrate all the feedback we receive and take it to the next level as a result. Right, moving on, we now move on to Central Winchester Regeneration. So we have a few slides to go through, I think, of quick update of status, and then I think as quickly as possible we'll want to move into Matt Walker's presentation. Matt's here from Jigsaw. Don't know if Ollie wants to stay at the table and throw questions at him just for their fun. You can each give feedback to the other afterwards in confidence, I think. So are we going? Yeah, if you could just kick off and get going on that, that would be great. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair. So I just want to give you an update, since again it's been quite some time since we came and talked to you about Central Winchester, Friarsgate Park, Archaeology Day, what's next in terms of ongoing activities for that key space that's been put in place. Brief reminder about what the development delivery plan is, because that's the next key stage for us, and then I will hand over to Matt to take you through, or let him take you through what Jigsaw have been up to in the last 6 months since they last spoke to you. So can we go to the next slide? So as you, I'm sure, all know, Friarsgate Park is now fully laid out. All the plans are in place. Everything is there that we need for that area. We've got new seating areas, platform for arts and cultural activities, soft landscaping with wildflowers, and much improved views of the River Itchen. It will serve as an outside community space, as well as enhancing connectivity through from Friarsgate to Broadway, but also improving biodiversity across that former hard landscape site. We then had another family archaeology day. This was the second series of days for people throughout the whole archaeological dig that's been going on in central Winchester. Again, done with pre-construct archaeology who were doing the actual dig themselves, but gave younger people in particular hands-on experience of discovering, washing and analysing fragments of ancient pottery that's been found on sites and parts of the other digs. 2 local businesses from King's Walk helped out with activities, pottery painting, tile design, inspired by some of the artefacts that have been found on those sites. We had over 100 people attending, again, similar amounts to previously, and this was at the end of August over the bank holiday weekend, and that was the end of a 6-week-long community dig. We've had over 120 community volunteers helping PCA uncover some of Winchester's archaeological history. As to the future, so we have got some ideas around how do we use that space. Some of the local people and local children that Jigsaw have been involved in engaging with on Central Winchester have done drawings. So it's about how do we interpret those into a mural that will go around the Friarsgate site. Some ideas around how can we use that space for particular events around Christmas, half-term light installations, working with the council's tourism and cultural teams to add some benefits to existing events and give them a new space potentially to activate and utilise going forward, and then building into some of the possibilities around the Hat Fair, again, which were in the basket yard last summer. The other activity underway is extending leases for all the occupants of King's Walk by the end of the year. And I hope I've done that quickly enough. Then to finish on, the development delivery plan is something that the council asked for as part of the process in appointing a developer. The items that are highlighted there in the green box are very much what Jigsaw have responded to. There was a day 1 delivery plan that was produced and then incorporated into development delivery plan. And then those other items in the bullet points, public realm delivery plan, infrastructure, phase delivery plan, and importantly, financial model are the additional bits that we're just about to receive. And so that is underway, it's due in very soon, and that will be then hopefully then reported to Cabinet it's currently programmed for December the 11th. Do I pause there, Chair, and take any questions, or do you want me to hand straight over to Mr. Woolger?
I think, knowing the presentation that Mr. Woolger has, that some of the questions that people might have on your presentation will get answered in the next presentation. So I suggest we keep going, and then we'll be in a better position to manage it. So why don't we crack on?
Thank you, Chair. If you want to jump straight to the next slide, it's actually the last slide of Mr. Bakey's is pretty good sort of segue to the first slide of mine. So the document that's been under preparation and has been passing backwards and forwards between officers in terms of reviewing drafts and so on and so forth in order to make sure that we're fully coordinated. It is predicated and based on the brief that we received. The brief we received has been integrated into the development agreement and contains references back to the supplementary planning document as well as the investment objectives. These two elements fed into the brief. Together with our stakeholder engagement and review of the emerging policy through the Reg 18 and Reg 19 process, we've developed our delivery plan. And it's very much our opportunity to replay all of the information we've received, the conversations that we've had, and position a document through our lens of how we approach development. And as a product of that, we've positioned sustainable development and social value as some of our key project drivers. You can see on the left, project context, matters like archaeology, the community and stakeholder engagement, as well as our market understanding. This is sort of context. We will set out also our design principles, matters that will guide us in terms of character and placemaking. There are some fundamentals around infrastructure across the site, things that we've learned, things that we've uncovered, things that we have been engaging with statutory bodies like the Environment Agency on, as well as movement. Movement is clearly key to achieving vacant possession at the CWR site, given that there is a bus station in the centre of the site currently. These elements will feed into our planning and delivery strategy, and all the while this work is going on, as we're preparing our planning application, we anticipate having meanwhile activity, which runs across the bottom of the page there. There are two elements within this which are greyed out as they are commercially sensitive, relating to financial, which is the financial model that Ken referred to previously, as well as development management matters, which are legal items that relate to the title and the like. As Ken said, that's due for release shortly and will be up for review in December. The next couple of slides, just a little look back on where we've got to in terms of engagement. These are just some snapshots in terms of the number of people that we've been engaging with. I mean, the first one there, 33 organisations, as indicated on the stakeholder map. The stakeholders map is the next page. It's worth saying that those 33 organisations are ongoing and engaged. It's not a case that we've had one meeting with them and that's it. It's actually a series of meetings, and there will be further meetings. And that's a similar kind of approach that we expect to take for the full duration of the project. It's about forming these networks, these connections, such that we can speak directly to the relevant stakeholders. I think we can go on. It's just a reminder of our stakeholder mapping. Hopefully, everybody agrees that it has been quite extensive in terms of the number of organisations and individuals that we've reached to date. There was a comment earlier about engagement and looking at numbers and whether or not the numbers matter and whether or not we're expecting more and more engagement as the process goes on. I think it's probably true to say that as content becomes available, as more and more content becomes available, certainly for CWR, I think we're expecting to see the amount of engagement, certainly from the general public, beginning to build. Notwithstanding that, I think that our early work here, in terms of building a strong foundation with these connections, will set us in very, very good stead for the next stage. Another item on engagement is just we undertook our co-creation workshops earlier on in the year, and the outputs from that have now been uploaded to our Commonplace platform, so they're available to view. It might be worth me just outlining the process there, which is through our stakeholder mapping, we invited a selection of different stakeholders to attend a co-creation workshop. Within that workshop, we started off with a guided conversation, illustrated conversation, where each attending member was asked to bring a couple of images. All of the stakeholders at that time sat with their post-its in hand as we go through each of the different discussion points that arise from the images that each of the stakeholders have brought. And everybody was asked to jot down what comes to mind. What's the theme? What's the item topic for discussion here? And do they agree with each of the other stakeholders? These were then filtered and gathered into sub-themes. Another series of filtering takes them into conceptual clusters. And then finally, the attendees were invited to condense these matters into a call to action for the project. The themes, whilst within the footprint process, which is something that Igloo is bringing to the table within the Jigsaw partnership, we have 6 themes across place, wellbeing, climate, circularity, community and nature. They can broadly be grouped under people, planet and place. And then we end up with this call to action, which I think is probably worth noting that it's not our words. These are the product of the stakeholders that attended this co-creation, and the idea here was to arrive at a paragraph or a sentence that everybody that attended agreed with, as okay, what does this look like in terms of our direction of travel? And the words are there, which is the Central Winchester Regeneration Project will be a restorative, climate conscious, low carbon and heritage sensitive regeneration process, building on what's already started with a multidisciplinary and co-designed response to the needs of creative, active and invested communities that delivers equitable outcomes for nature, residents and community. It's quite a lot of words there. You almost need to pause slightly in the middle. It will be designed flexibly and built to last, a model for sustainable living, working and communities with a focus on young businesses, talent and people. It will be integrated into Winchester and a place that citizens are proud of. It will provide sustainable movement choices and through design, put inclusivity and diversity at the heart. It will retrofit buildings and not people. That is the call to action that our stakeholders will hold us to. There are a couple of points, and perhaps now might be an opportunity for me to just respond to Councillor Lee's comments. So just sort of building off some of this process, these elements, and there's more online to delve into, but I didn't want to read through a document in this forum. Against each of our 6 footprint themes, we will assemble what we call a footprint action plan. The footprint action plan will have a series of interventions across each of those themes that will be validated by our footprint advisory board, and we will be challenged by them. They're an independent. It's not a jigsaw team. They will challenge us as to whether or not we're pushing ourselves far enough across each of those 6 different disciplines, across place, climate, connectivity, well-being, circularity, and nature. Some of the immediate ideas that spring to mind are, water is a challenge in Winchester, and we know that. There's this principle of spongy cities, which we find very interesting. And I think there is something about that permeability for water that will be of value, not just for maintaining sort of surface water flow, but also from a placemaking perspective. I think there are opportunities as well as challenges here, and the 2 are kind of dovetailed together. I think it's worth commenting on when it comes to this process of the operational carbon. We've actually become quite good at managing. We're able to design energy efficient buildings, very well insulated, and actually once they're built, they're relatively low burden, and certainly significantly improved. The big challenge we have is around embodied carbon. It's that upfront cost. It is a case of getting on and retrofitting where possible, keep buildings where you can. The carbon's already been emitted in the process of building a building in the past. If you demolish it, you're resetting the clock and you're doubling up on the carbon. That's one area that we're very, very interested in. We think there's some work there to be done around materiality that will really help us. With regards to biodiversity, something very unique about the site. Something very unique about the topography of the site. Having a river running through Winchester, there's a very natural pinch point that almost centres around the bus station, where you can see a corridor of green running north and south, and you almost have the bus station as that pinch point. You can kind of look to St John's as almost a green corridor, but as you look north across Lawn and Godson House, it begins to get green again, and even more so to the south of the bus station as you head down towards the cathedral. We've got an opportunity. Biodiversity thrives when it has the ability to move around, and you do need that green corridor. I think we have a really good opportunity there to add something of value.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed. So let's quickly, and that was very helpful, and I think will mean that we probably don't need to fire quite as many questions at Mr. Bakey as we do for the first part of the presentation. So are there any questions that relate to the initial section talking about Friarsgate Park, Archaeological Day, and the ongoing activities there? Councillor Godfrey.
Thank you. The work done in the archaeology dig was obviously very well received. How much activity is now being recorded in Friarsgate Park? How many people are we having lunches or playing in there? What sort of uses be made of the park?
I'm afraid it's anecdotal because we don't have counters of people moving through the site. I've certainly been there. I was there on Friday. There was people, younger people sitting there enjoying the sunshine, benches, having lunch. We've seen people in there drawing, sketching views of Winchester quite regularly. So that, I'm afraid, it is anecdotal. It is being used. We see, unfortunately, some of the rubbish that people have left, and we definitely know it's been used, and so that's something we have to have a look at how we deal with that going forward. So it is being used as a cut through. I think we've had an issue with the bus station because actually people have been using Friarsgate to go into the bus station and then going into parts of the bus station which are the place shouldn't be where the buses are moving, basically. So we know that it's been used, but unfortunately we don't have any counters to give you actual numbers.
Thank you. I mean, I've also heard that it has become quite a useful route for people, for example, coming down from Winnell, because it's quite a much better way of, you don't really want to walk along Friarsgate. It's not particularly pleasant. And so actually it offers a nice and appreciated route for some people off Friarsgate to get through to the city in a quieter and more attractive way. But any other questions about that? I don't know, Councillor Aaron, you're the councillor for the area. Do you have any perspective on what you've seen there, or?
I have visited it a couple of times, and sadly both times there'd been nobody there. But this was some time ago. This was sort of 2 or 3 weeks ago. But yeah, I mean, it looks good. Where I so agree with what's been said is this opening up of the river. I think it is just, that walk down Bishop and the Bridge walk is so wonderful, and if we can do more of that, of making the river accessible to the public, then that seems to me to be very important. And so, Friarsgate is a real beginning on that, and it's great.
Yes, so the ancient, I was at a talk the other day about the ancient waterways there, and those waterways you see there are genuinely really ancient and were put in place in Anglo-Saxon times in order to help with management of water and supply of water to the different buildings within the city. In fact, I will send you a video of the talk that we made about the history. It turns out that not only is the Revenue and Benefits Department of the City Council considerably older than the Mayoralty, but it turns out that the people who manage our sluices, or as they were called, hatches in the Anglo-Saxon times, also long predates the Mayoralty. We've probably had people in special maintenance or its equivalent managing the sluices of the city for considerably longer than we've had a mayor. The dilemma. So we've talked about.
We still call them hatches in the countryside.
We still. I'm very pleased to hear it. Anything else on that section? Otherwise, the development delivery plan the sort of last slide of Mr. Bakey and the first slide of Jigsaw. Any questions about that? Councillor Godfrey.
Just confirmation of when the financial model will be available to councillors.
In time for cabinet report on December the 11th.
And we won't have to sign an NDA to see it this time.
Not while I'm alive and breathing. But maybe I'm about to be able. No, Mercedes.
Thank you. No, that we don't intend to have NDAs. However, some of the detail will need to be taken in exempt because it's got commercial information from our flats.
So yes, so the financial model will be discussed in exempt, but it will be available, I think, to all councillors. It's important that we will have a chance to scrutinise it and understand it. But it will be confidential. It will be on pink paper, which means something to councillors and not to anybody else. Any other questions about the development agreement? And then the I'll betray my biases. I think very interesting and inspiring engagement update, particularly about the co-creation workshops. Any questions about that, Councillor Horrell?
Not so much a question, Chair, more a compliment, because actually I think the stakeholder map and the efforts you've made to engage with all the different sort of groups, interest groups, and those who clearly are passionate about the place is really helpful. And I think having been through the earlier stages of this, that can only stand us in good stead as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you for the positivity of those comments. Any other questions or comments on that section? Well, there we go. We're 3 minutes behind schedule, and we started 2 minutes late. So how's that for black belt chairing? Apologise for overrunning by 1 minute. No, well, thank you very much indeed for bringing that in. I'm particularly excited to see the outcome of the co-creation workshops, and I think something really crystallising, something really important there. Obviously, you know, one of those things which you read, agree with, but it also slightly stretches you versus where you are now, which is always the sign of a good, creative and engaging process. So thank you very much indeed for that. And thank you very much indeed for coming and presenting the work. Thank you to Mr. Bakey. Thank you for everything you're doing at this stage. Obviously, we're into the last straight of the DDP, the Development Delivery Plan. Very important stage that we're about to go through. But seeing this work gives us, I think, gives us all confidence that it's based on a really deep understanding of what people are thinking in the local area and the needs that they have and the expectations they have for this very important part of our wonderful city. So thank you very much indeed, Matt, for coming in to present today, for taking us through your work. And I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. So thank you, colleagues, for all your input today. Thank you to Ken, Barry and the team, Eleanor, for all the work that you've done preparing the meeting and working with our partners to get us to this point. Thank you, colleagues. I declare the meeting closed.